Welcome to episode 2 of the Last Choice Network's House of the Dragon podcast. James, we had a long one. Anybody that's watching this will notice we don't change clothing.
You know, it's funny, we did this once where we did change clothing, and I could tell that we're just like, F it. Like,
no, it doesn't matter.
no one cares.
We are catching up on these podcasts, and we are doing both episode 1 and episode 2 back to back here tonight. We're trying to catch up, and we are going to get into season 1, episode 2 of the House of the Dragon, The Rogue Prince. That is the name of this episode. We did mention in the last episode that we didn't have any opening credits. No, it was just a narrative and a monologue. James, we got opening credits.
Yeah, we did, and it was amazing.
We got, and I don't know, and we kind of wanted to bring this up. We are not lore aficionados of everything that is Game of Thrones. We have both watched Game of Thrones entire series before this. I have read 1.5 of the books. James, I believe you have read none of the books.
Yeah, I'm not much of a reader.
So I'm not much of a reader. They're audiobooks. You don't have to read it. You can just listen. So with this scene, this new cutscene, like, I'm not going to be able to tell you all the craziness, but it was very cool. It was basically, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is the blood symbolizing the bloodlines of the Targaryen, because there's this blood just flowing through all of these stone structures, and they're hitting these kind of like wheel insignias, and I believe it's the symbol of all the past Targaryen kings, maybe?
I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea what you're talking about because I was just in awe of the entire opening thing.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I watched it, I was just like, oh, this is cool. Look at all the blood going everywhere and the way it's doing it. But I do believe it's the sigils of all of the past Targaryen kings that are it's like activating when it hits them. I could be completely wrong there, so please in the comments let us know if we're completely off base of what this in scene was.
Well, you can let Ender know, because I'm gonna stick to the point that I don't care what it is. I just think it's cool.
Well, the opening scenes always tell you a story and they change, so I kind of like to guess the story there, and with the map. The Game of Thrones map where it's building all the stuff, you would see new things get built.
Yeah, that was cool.
And then you'd be like, ooh, we're going somewhere. Like, we're going somewhere new. I don't know what this is. But yeah, just a amazing opening scene. And I love how it ends with just the Targaryen logo and all the blood flows like right into it at the bottom. So, yeah, just really brilliant opening scene. Love the music. It was Game of Thrones light. I felt like the music was. I was kind of hoping the intro music would be more Targaryen-ish, but it was definitely like the Game of Thrones.
No, like I said last episode, I'm glad they're keeping to the traditional. This is their theme music.
That's fair. So after that, we just get right into it, man. We just get right into it. We cut to just this submerged, nailed corpse in the middle of like the ocean flats here with crabs all over them. Going back to Corlys in the first episode, who was talking about how the crab feeder was killing people and things. I think we get our first look at the crab feeder's handiwork and how he got his name, the crab feeder.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how Game of Thrones knows just the amount of gore to give you to make your stomach just turn. And the part I'm talking about is when the crab goes in the guy's foot. and then his foot starts twitching because he's not dead yet. It knows just enough to make me go, oh, yeah, I just didn't need that. I didn't need that. Thank you. Thank you for it. But, and I mean, there's a lot of people out here, and it looks like the crab feeder is just taking people down. And Corlys was definitely worried about that. And it's an area called the Stepstones. So from that, we go right into the king's court. And I want to point this out right here. We don't learn it here, but I want to point it out here. I'm sorry, not King's Court, King's Council. And I want to point out here, we have made a 6-month time jump from the last episode. And we see, there was a conscious decision to open this scene like this. You see wine pouring into a cup. And it's Rhaenyra that is still the cupbearer,
which just completely baffled me. You
baffled everything from the other
end
episode.
The first episode with him saying, "I've wasted my time not preparing you to take the throne." Like you see this king have all this guilt with his daughter, and you're like, okay, cool. He's about to like make her a big deal. You see all these people bend the knee, pledging their allegiance to her, and here 6 months later, she's still just the pouring wine.
Yeah.
What?
And I mean, it goes back again to what was said in the other ones of like, they do not want the male characters, the males in this universe do not want a female on the throne. Like they don't want it. Even her own father, after all of this, and you think Viserys is having a turning point. After all this has happened to him with his brother and everything, you think there's a turning point, and here she is, still just pouring wine in a cup. And after that, Corlys barges in.
Well, they're in the middle of a conversation first before he barges in. We learned that the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard has just passed.
Oh, yep. I'm sorry. I
missed his sleep.
He had just passed.
So they're having this conversation. The king says, "I hope he passed in his peacefully." They said, "Yes, Your Grace, he was found to have passed gently in his sleep." And that's when you see Rhaenyra is still going around. They mentioned the Silent Sisters who are preparing his remains. And they're basically saying they need to find a replacement for the
Corlys
Kingsguard.
is not at the table. He's not there yet. And they're just talking. They need to find a replacement. And then he barges in and he's just like, 4 of my ships were lost. The last one was flying my banner. So he's like, there's 4 more ships that have gone to the crab feeder, which I think is what we were seeing in that opening scene. The Stepstones is just going insane right now.
Yeah.
And he's just mad that they're sitting here just talking about normal everyday court business. They're not talking about like going after anybody. They're not talking about what's going to be done to stop the crab feeder. They're not talking about like what's going to be done. And Corlys barely states like, what's going to be done about my ships and my men? Like Corlys wants to know. And my least favorite character of this entire series solidifies why he's my least favorite character of this entire series. Mr. Otto, the Hand of the King. And I apologize I misspoke for this because we did watch these episodes back to back and I spoke on this in the first episode. It actually happened in this episode where he basically says, the crown will compensate you for your ship and the crew and will make compensation to the families. So we're just going to pay them off. Like, we don't have time to deal with this. Like, Corlys, you lost some people. We'll pay you for the ship. We'll pay you for whatever it may be, and we'll pay the families off. We're not going to war. We're not dealing with this. We don't talk about war.
Yeah, and I find it interesting. And again, coming from someone that didn't read the books, I don't know the history. I don't know where this is going. So if you do know this, and I look like an idiot, I find it interesting that Corlys basically wants them to go after this crab feeder and take care of these pirates. He looks at them as just bottom feeders and pirates, and because the no one's standing up to them. The crown's not standing up to them. They're doing whatever. And the king and the court basically are saying this isn't just some pirates. They are supplied
cities.
by the free cities. And Corlys says it's not the free cities. So this is very subtle that they mention this, but I find it interesting that the council thinks that this is the free cities supplying them and helping them get this. And Corlys just wants to go basically war and kill these people and get rid of them really quickly.
And and then Otto makes a statement, and he's basically, I warn you, Corlys, a seat at the king's table does not make you his equal. So I think there's a power struggle here, even inside of the king's court, of like where you sit and how much say you have at the court, and how much influence you have with the king. And then the king kind of goes on and he's just kind of, like, I'm not ready to go to city. And he says he has acted. He sent envoys to Pentos and Voltis, or whatever it may be, to see if they have a common ground. Like, oh, I sent some people over there. They're going to find common ground. The Stepstones will be settled in time, And then Rhaenyra is just sitting here listening to all of this, and you kind of see you're watching this, and you're seeing the wheels turning in her head. And they're turning in her head, and she turns to her father, and she's like, "We have dragon riders. You've got me. Fly a fucking dragon over there and burn them all to hell, and then this would be over with."
And you can see at first, what I like is that they glance to the king, her father, and at first he has this look of like, yeah, that's my girl, until Corlys uses it in his favor. Yeah. And his tone immediately changes.
He kind of looks, he looks over there and she says, "Send what?" And he does say, he says to her, he's like, "It's not that simple." And I kind of get that. And it's like, it's a show of force and all the things that she's saying.
But I like how, I like
Corlys's line of, at least she has a plan.
And I thought that was funny because the king's tone changed and so did hers. It was like all of a sudden she was like, "Oh, I should not have spoke up." Like, she was immediately realizing that although she could be right in all this, like, she knew her father was going to be upset because now her words were being used against her dad.
But here's the biggest issue is it's not even her father. Her father's just kind of sitting there and has this moment where he's like, it's not like, I almost felt like when he's saying, and I agree with you, when Corlys said that, kind of the mood changed. But with him saying to Rhaenyra, like, it's not that simple, I thought we were going to get a discussion on why it's not that simple.
But we did
him showing her like, hey, we got to think about this. We got to do that. Like training her, like, okay, she's the cupbearer, but at least she's in there on the conversations. So she can, speak up. Obviously, she wasn't supposed to talk because she didn't have a marble. Got to have the marble to talk at the table. And I did actually find out. I looked it up. That is what the marble's for.
Okay.
Like, you have to have this marble to have a seat at the table. That's like a symbol of you have a seat at the king's court. So don't lose your marble. But then Otto, again, my most hated character in here, looks at the king with this, just like, this girl, she doesn't know shit. King, maybe there's better use for the princess's talents, my grace. Her talents would be good elsewhere. And like that she could choose, I believe they send her to choose the new king's captain.
So there should be seven Kingsguard. They need a seventh.
Yeah.
And she's been sent out there to see all these princes that could be and Kingsguard.
But here's Otto, the pompous asshole, that obviously doesn't value anything that she's ever had to say. Oh, maybe we can use her talents somewhere else. And the Kingsguard there, it's Sir Harold, is like, I think that's a good idea. Obviously, he's the Kingsguard. He can't say anything there. But you can even look at Harold's face when he does that of like, really? You're like, even he's like, really? You're going to listen to Otto? Like
Yeah,
your
and
daughter's
now we're
giving
gonna
you,
let this girl pick.
yeah, your daughter is like making a point here. Otto's there, and now you're going to just let her do this? Like, why? What is it? What does it make sense? So she's like escorted out, and then we get to the map room. I'm always gonna call it the map room because that's just what I know it as. And they have, I have to point it out because they definitely like made a close-up shot of this, like the step stool that she steps up on, and like I have to say the props and the designers and the artists, the amount of time and detail they put into making this step stool and all of how broken it is and like all the roughness around it. I'm so glad that they're like showing stuff off like this. Because it just makes the sets that much bigger. So she's so short. She needs to step to see over the balcony to see all of the knights that are standing underneath that she has to choose for the 7th Kingsguard. And I'm just looking at this like chess board that they have. They built like these, it's not really a chess board, but the like board that they have in the middle that has all of the different families like crests on it.
Yep.
Like, do they just have that lying around?
Maybe.
When this happens, like who had to sit there and make all of this just for this moment to happen in case this guy dies in his sleep? Like, were they like, okay, this guy's getting pretty old, he's probably gonna go, let's start carving these things? You know, like what peasant had to make
I would
this
imagine
overnight?
these things already existed and they've got one for everyone.
I'm hoping that they do, and they just have it for each family, and they've made it and it's just sitting there and they bring it out as ceremonial. But I just thought it was kind of funny that you just have this like ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, she's out there, and again, and I know I'm talking a lot here.
Well, they introduce the first prince.
They introduce the first, but I want to point something out again here. I want to point something out even more. Otto decides to go with her.
Well, he kind of shows up as she's in the process of doing this.
Okay, so she's there and they're announcing the first night, and then he slides in the background, and after he's like, oh, she can't talk over here, he's gonna come here and follow her and undermine her even more, as she like, this guy does not like this girl, like doesn't like this girl at all, in my opinion. So he follows her and they announce the first night. So I'll let you take it from there, announcing the first night.
Well, they announce the first prince comes up, and she's like, you know, they give all his accomplishments. They're all tourney. We talked about this in the first episode. They're all tourney knights. And the guy from the Kingsguard's just kind of like, you know, whatever. And then she's not really sure what to do when they like announce all these accomplishments, almost like, what am I supposed to do now? I will say here, Otto says, to basically gives her the nod and says, you should thank them for their service. So she says, you know, we thank you for your loyal service to the crown.
Well, and the only thing that first guy did was he caught a poacher.
Correct. Yeah.
Like, that's it. It's just a
So
poacher.
then they move on to the second one. And again, winner of all these things, blah, blah, blah. And she finally is just like, what is going on here? Do any of these people have actual combat experience? To which finally Otto says Ser Criston Cole. So they call Ser Criston Cole up.
Well, I want to kind of point something out, because they're standing above, and all of these princes, knights, whatever they may be, have a squire behind them holding up a flag and a banner. Only one of them doesn't, and it's Ser Criston Cole. He's the only one, and he comes from, and you can tell by even his like board piece. It's not intricate. It's just like a stick, you know, that they have there. And because he's not from a wealthy family. He's not from a powerful family he at all. So I kind of want to point that out.
But I like how she says, do any of these knights have combat experience? And she says, she looks right at the two of them and says, beyond, you know, poachers.
poachers. Yeah.
So she's very like annoyed by the whole thing, and they say yes, Ser Criston Cole. So they call him forward. Now I think we do need to point out he is the one that fought Daemon in the jousting.
He is the one that fought Daemon.
He
so
made
she
Daemon
already
yield. Now keep in
she
mind,
already liked him.
Daemon does have all this loyalty of the City Watch, and that will come into play. And we talked about how the Kingsguard is different. They must have 7 representatives, and she's super smiley and excited. She clearly remembers him from the jousting event.
Well,
and
really
he's also
from
Dorne. He's also Dornish.
He's Dornish, and which is supposed to be dreamy. The dreamboat.
So it's the dream, and he definitely has that appearance of the Dornish prince from the Game of Thrones. So I like that's another familiarity that we get. And after just hearing a little bit, she's super excited. Ask him. She says, "You saw combat in the Stormlands." He talks a little bit about the Dornish incursions and what he did, and then immediately she's like, well, Ser Criston Cole's it. Like, that's it. That's the end of it.
Yeah, so she does that. I want to jump back because we missed one piece here from the King's Council that I do want to talk about. So the King's Council scene, they are talking about Daemon. And Daemon did not go back to the Vale.
Correct.
So Daemon has now actually went to Dragonstone. Now, here's the thing, and this is where you kind of have to know a little bit of lore on why that's such a big deal of him being at Dragonstone. Dragonstone is supposed to be where the heir goes and kind of learns to rule while they're waiting to become of age. So that's actually Rhaenyra's. Rhaenyra should be at Dragonstone and taking, or Dragonstone is hers technically.
Yeah.
Because that's where the heir is supposed to be. So I just wanted to point that out because we didn't mention that. They did talk how Daemon didn't listen and has been fortifying Dragonstone for 6 months now.
Yeah, and that's how we learned it's been a 6-month jump.
That's how we know it's been the 6-month jump. So then they kind of go on there.
Well, I wanted to. We definitely need to talk about what happens when she chooses Criston Cole.
No, yeah, let's get back to that. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss that part.
Correct,
that was part of that earlier council. So now she chooses Criston Cole.
And this is where I want you to jump in because I know you have so much love for Otto. What does Otto do at this point? Immediately jumps in, and we get back to this whole game side of thing that Rhaenyra refuses to play.
Yeah, well, he's like, he basically jumps in and tells her, "Don't be too hasty, princess." And against Reavers from the Long Islands, and basically
he points out 2 families that are allies to the crown,
and basically to the crown and everything that they have, and that she's just jumping in hastily and doesn't know what she's doing.
Yeah, he basically wants to, he is all about playing the game and she isn't. So he looks at it as you need to pick one of these 2 people strictly because they're allies to the crown. And she is like, no, I'm going to pick the person that knows combat because they're supposed to protect her father.
He does say like Seaguard, for instance, is in the realm's prime defense. Like it's got a prime location. We need that place. And yeah, she just sticks to her guns of like, my father should be protected by somebody that's actually seeing combat.
And I like how she doesn't put that in a statement. She puts that in the form of a very rhetorical question to them.
Shouldn't he be?
Yes.
Like, shouldn't he be?
She says, those men are tourney knights. My father should be defended by a man who's known real combat.
Yeah.
And then she kind of pauses and she said, should he not? And looks right at Otto. Of course, he has to humbly fall into his place because she is above him and says, of course you're princess.
And her father told her to go pick. Like it's not Otto's choice.
It's like she knows that she has this it's almost like it's that Daemon, when the king's like,
it's that
King says to Otto in the first episode, you told me to make him in charge of this. You didn't like it. So then you made me in charge of this. And then you didn't like it. So then you told me to put Daemon in charge of this. And now you don't like it. It was his idea to make the princess go out there and choose. So she's going to choose who she wants because he suggested. Yeah, so that's that Daemon connection.
I also think that's a Daemon connection. I also think the reason why I think he has true hatred towards Rhaenyra is because Rhaenyra is not Alicent. Rhaenyra isn't the I'm going to listen, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to say she is. I have a mind of my own. And we keep making the comparison, but it's back to Arya. Like, she's gonna say what she's gonna say, and she's gonna do what she wants to do. And if you're gonna give me a task to do, I'm gonna do it how I think is right.
And keep in mind, he's pimping out his daughter to possibly play this game, and Rhaenyra is a threat to him. His way to the throne.
We kind of get right into that in the next scene. So we cut back to this model, and we're in the king's quarters, and he's in front of all these models, and this is where I have even less respect for the king now.
Well, first, I don't know if this is what you're about to jump into, but I do want to say I spent the whole first week thinking that this king had modeled this entire structure.
This is where I'm going.
Okay, go ahead.
Nope. He has the stonemasons makeup for him.
But at least he gives credit. I will say that. He didn't try to play it off. He immediately was like, no, I didn't do this.
It's like, okay, here I'm thinking like, okay, he's got some talent in something. Like, at least he can make these little like rock dioramas. He's like, no. I don't make them. I just tell the stonemasons what to make because I like the history, and I just place them here when they're done. And I'm like, he's even a poser when it comes to building models. Like, he doesn't even build his own model. He just plays with them. Like, he literally is just playing with dolls now in his little, here's my model of old Valyria, and I'm going to just play with the dolls.
Hey, listen, don't judge guys like that. I love Lego sets, but I hate building them, so I make my stepdaughter build them.
Okay, well, then you're one of them. Okay, like... build the damn Legos yourself.
No, it's too much, man. I can't do it. I don't have the patience for it.
I'm not gonna have. I mean, some of them are ridiculous, but anyway. So, I guess for the last 6 months, the king has not stopped having his little visits with Alicent,
which still look very innocent in this scene.
Which still looks very innocent. But here's where the king knows he's doing something wrong. Because he asks Alicent how his daughter's doing. And, how Rhaenyra's doing. And Alicent kind of responds to him of like, well, she lost her mother. Like, she's trying to do the best she can. Like, maybe you should talk to her. Like, kind of just putting him and he's like, no. The last thing I want to do is talk to my daughter. Like,
yeah, he's terrified
of her. And he also asks Alicent, like, do you tell her about our little talks? Because I don't think she would understand them. And it's like, that's where I'm like, okay, the king knows this is not right. But I feel like from this exchange, he's kind of falling for Alicent.
Yeah, he's starting to get some feelings for sure.
He's starting to get feelings for her. And I don't know in what way. Like, is it the daughter? Is it like the daughter I never had? Is it like a love interest? And we'll kind of just come out with it. This entire episode is all based around what underage girl is the king gonna marry?
God.
Like, that is what this episode is incredibly linear compared to the first episode.
You're correct.
So we're in the king's quarters and everything's going on there. And then it just, you have that exchange. He drops one of the pieces and it's a broken dragon. Like, the dragon breaks and she picks it up, and there's like this weird exchange between them. And you can tell there's tension, and you can tell like Alicent is saying all the right things, but that's not her lunch partner she wants to be with. Like, she's not there. You can still feel like she's not there on her own accord these last 6 months. She's still listening to her father. So then we move on to a scene in the Sept. So I did kind of do some research on this one. It is not the Sept that blows up in Game of Thrones.
Okay, I definitely thought that it was.
So it's not the Sept that blows up in Game of Thrones. I listened to a Cast of Kings podcast, and they have one of their correspondents on there. I'm sorry, I can't think of her name, but she writes for Insider magazine, I believe. She's like their entertainment correspondent. and she like still framed it and put it up against the other ones in an article and shows that these are not the same seps. The one that this one is, the one that gets blown up by Cersei with the wildfire hasn't been built yet, but it is definitely a sept of the I guess the 7 gods, and has all the stars and the points. We have this very, like innocent, sweet exchange between Rhaenyra and Alicent about her mother and her father, and she's kind of just talking about it, and they're kind of talking about her father remarrying a little bit in there at the same time, and Alicent's kind of like, no, he picked you. He picked you. And Rhaenyra is a lot smarter than you think she is. And she's like, he didn't pick me. He's
basically stuck with me, and he hates my basically uncle.
Well, no, he wanted to shun Daemon. Like the only reason he did this was because he wanted to hurt Daemon more, because I'm still a fucking cupbearer.
Correct. Yeah.
Like nothing's changed. Like, she knows what her place is, and she's not dumb to the game. She gets the game that's being played here, and that she's not going to just take this spot, that they definitely are waiting for somebody else. So they are in the sept, and then they have they sit down and they're praying, and I want to say they're praying to there's the statue. I believe it's the mother god that they have, because one of the 7 is called the mother. Would make sense as they're talking about their mothers, and they're praying, and they're Alicent says she says to Rhaenyra's like, what do I say? And she says, anything you want, it's just between you and the gods. Mm-hmm. And Rhaenyra starts crying, and it's just a really nice moment of 2 friends trying to get through the loss of their mothers.
Yeah, and she does together. Knowing that the king had already said he's afraid to talk, he doesn't know what to do, but he wants to talk to his daughter. Alicent here encourages Rhaenyra to reach out to her father. So she's kind of playing both sides here. But in all fairness, to what as good friends would seem like the right thing to say to someone.
Yeah, and I think everything was sincere here. I don't think there was any backwards.
There's no intent to play a game.
No intent to play a game here. It's just them being good friends, and both of them have gone through tragic, losses of their mothers. So, through all of this, I think the character that I have liked the most out of all of them has been Corlys.
I don't like Corlys.
I like Corlys.
Let me get this wrong. When I say I don't like Corlys as the character in the House of the Dragons. I think the actor is phenomenal. I think the character is phenomenal. I don't like him because he's doing such a good job in his character, if that makes sense. I know there's some internet trolls out there going on about this particular character, but I don't hate this character for that reason. I hate this character for what they are in the show. Similar to how you don't like Otto.
Yeah, I like him in the show because he's the only one that has shown any care towards the people that have been getting murdered and killed, and he wants to do something about it.
Well, you're about to talk about why I don't like him.
Then he gets the little ding on me, and it's like,
if you don't like Otto, you can't tell me you like this guy still.
Well, so there's I don't like what he does here, but I understand it. I understand what Otto's doing, but Otto's doing it backhanded, sly, without saying anything to the king. Corlys is at least enough of a man to stand in front of him. Well, let's call it what it is. And what we're talking about is basically Corlys offers his daughter to the king. Well, first they tell him basically, everyone thinks your kingdom's a joke right now.
Because he does ask to speak frankly, and the king allows him to. So he doesn't speak out of turn.
But here's another point where again, we're out here, and here's a chance for, and I'll keep droning on this. Here's a chance for Viserys to have a good conversation about what we should do forward with one of the people in his council. But he's kind of just playing like, oh, you know, you're my favorite cousin. You know, all this is great and everything. And then Corlys just is like, I want to speak frank to you. All the stuff that's going on with your brother, all the stuff that's going on at the Stepstones, you just lost your wife. You just lost the heir. Like, people think you're a joke. They really do. It's time for you to show some kind of strength, something. And I love the line that he says here. And it basically, he says to him, to endure a storm, you can either sail into it or around it, but you must never await its coming. So you must act. Whether we're going to go out of our way to go around this or we're going to head right through the middle, you have to act. And that is the key to this reign of this king, is that he has seen so much prosperity that he does not know how to act when things are going wrong. He doesn't.
He just wants to turn a blind eye and
he wants to turn a blind eye. And Corlys is like, time to man up. And he basically do you have a specific course of action? And he kind of looks at his wife. And here's where I have to respect Corlys. He obviously talked to his wife about this. He didn't just make this decision on his own. He talked to the queen that never was and basically wants to join their families. Where it gets skeevy is his daughter's only 11 years old or 12 years old.
But you don't see that right away.
You don't see that right away.
Now, what's interesting, if you're like me, you do this daughter is shown briefly during the jousting tournament in the opening episode, but I didn't put two and two together. So I find it interesting. It is much later in this episode before you see this daughter, about 10 minutes later.
I jumped the gun on that one, but that's where this is like, join the families. Lyanna is a much stronger match, and you know, you should join. We need to join our families.
And this is about playing that game, right? It's about the Targaryens being with the Valyrian, like, right? Or yeah.
Well, basically, he's Valyrian, so it's like it's joining those two powerful families together, and she is a Targaryen.
Well, she's the queen that never was, so.
But she's Targaryen blood.
Correct.
So Venarian blood, Targaryen blood, joining with a Targaryen. Okay, there's a little incest there, but we know that's okay in Game of Thrones. And so, and the king kind of just be like, well, I didn't really think about remarrying, and I'm not really sure. It's only been so many months, and he just kind of brushes it off. And then we get to a scene that he has
with his daughter. They're having dinner.
With his daughter at dinner. And unfortunately, this is where like my show notes get really bad because I was super tired as I'm walking through this. So I don't have as much detail as I had on the end of this episode. But he's talking to his daughter here, and basically he's just like, we haven't talked much.
Yeah.
Like we haven't talked a lot. And she's kind of taking the advice from Alicent here and trying to talk to her father. And she brings up what happened in the king's court.
Well, first she does talk about picking the Kingsguard knight.
Yeah.
And he seems very proud that she stuck with her guns, and so, which opens the door for her to talk about more what you're about to talk about. She finds that now she can speak a little bit more frank, and he shuts it down.
Yeah, so she's like, today in the small council, and he immediately shuts her down. Pay it no mind. I thought, and she's like, I could bring some insights. I have these things that I could talk about. And he's like, you're young. You'll learn. Like, not even willing to have the conversation with her of like, and this is where if he really cared about her being the heir, this is where he might even be like, hey, I understand you have some ideas. Here's what we're going to do. Hold them in. Don't speak at the small council. When everything's over, we'll stay behind and talk a little bit more about the ideas that you have of what you heard and things like that. Like he could have done something like that.
But
Like
no,
he
he just
could have
shuts
been
her down
supportive.
completely.
No, he just shuts her down completely and be like, "You're young. It doesn't matter. You're just young. You'll learn. But I'm not going to teach you. Like you'll learn what? To keep your mouth shut? To not say anything?" I think that's really what he's trying to say here. Is not that you'll actually learn how to be queen. Then we have to get to our wonderful scene of wounds and things.
What is going on with this king? Every episode, is he gonna? What's gonna be next? A foot next episode?
We missed this, and I'm actually really upset we missed this in the first episode, and I had it in my show notes. So, when the king is banishing Daemon, something very important happens on the throne. He gets a cut from it on his hand, and when we had mentioned in the last episode of how George R.R. Martin was upset with the way the throne looked because it looked too easy to sit on. One of the lore around the throne is that if it cuts you and you end up getting a lot of cuts, so I'm wondering if his back wound came from it as well. And the throne is cutting you, that you're not worthy to be sitting on the throne. That's big lore around that. And he does get a cut in the first episode on his hand. Right about where it is on his hand, here on his finger, that they're doing this. So not only did he get a cut on the throne, it has now become necrotic. And they have to do a maggot treatment on it in order for him to get this necrotic flesh off his fingers. So the interesting part about this is George R.R. Martin is really interested in like medieval medicine and like medicine that they still use today. They still use maggots today to remove necrotic flesh from wounds because they are amazing at eating flesh but leaving all the living flesh. So this is actually like, when you look at it, you're like, oh my God, this is medieval. It's like, no, they still use that now. Mm-hmm. Like they still would do that to remove necrotic flesh. But of course, Otto's there. And Otto knows everything that's going on. And the king basically tells him.
And the maester's
about
there
his
too.
And the maester's there. But because he's getting worked on. The maester's always there. Tells him about his little meeting with Corlys. Which is interesting because the king doesn't know. And I would assume Otto hasn't told her, and I know Alicent hasn't told him, that he was the one that sent Alicent to his quarters 6 months ago.
Correct.
And basically tells him that they proposed marriage.
Well, I find it funny that first Otto says, such matters should be discussed with the small council. And the king says, that's what I'm doing, discussing it. So what are your thoughts, Otto? Like, it is true. The king isn't hiding that this conversation had. He just said, this is what happened. I'm discussing it with you now. Yes, we're all on the small council. So I'm letting the rest of you know. Give me your opinion.
And it's also not like the maester's not there right now either.
Yeah. So
like he's hearing it too.
Yeah.
And he's on the small council. So basically tells him he proposed marriage, and his first like reaction was like, Corlys has overreached, my lord. Like he's overreached his bounds. And they're kind of talking about how well that marriage might be. And I love how Otto kind of uses some reverse psychology here on the king, of where he's like, I know when my own wife passed, I couldn't have imagined ever replacing her.
Yeah.
But I think it's okay for you to do it, King.
Well, he's basically
I
saying,
think it's right.
I mean, I will give them credit. He's basically, because at first the king's first thought was, and again, I want to point this out. At first I looked at it a different way until you have constantly pointed out that the king is weak and he doesn't like having hard conversations. His first reaction was, I don't know how my daughter Rhaenyra will feel about it. To which the Maester and Otto are basically saying, you're the king, who cares? But you are the king, you basically, the realm expects you to remarry, especially because you still do not have a son.
Yeah, he says, he's like, you're compelled for duty's sake.
Yes.
Like, I couldn't, but I like how he says, when my wife died, I could never imagine being in your situation. I don't envy you. I couldn't imagine it, but you know what, King, you must do it for your sake there. You have to do this. And I just like, it's just Otto planting the seed that he needs to remarry and not telling him who to marry. But in my mind, I'm thinking he has his own agenda and his daughter, and you know that's what he wants.
Yeah.
So he definitely wants Alicent in this conversation, because why would he? And he was so smart. He started this shit 6 months ago. Otto is a schemer and a planner. He planned this the day that baby died. Otto was ready to go. So then we go back to where I jumped the gun a little bit, and we finally see poor little Lyanna, like, so tiny. And the way they shot this, and the actress that they chose, she is a baby.
I mean, you could have told me she was 8 years old, and I would have believed it.
She is a baby. She's supposed to be, what, 12 here?
I think, yeah.
And, you know, even the king's kind of walking around like, this just feels awkward. Like, this whole thing is awkward. And little Lady Lyanna here, she is just trying her hardest. And, you know, she's trying to stay interested in, like, you were the Black Dread, and you rode the last dragon.
Right before he died. Now, can we talk about can we break down this conversation a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
So she says, you know, you, like you said, you were flying in the Black Dread. You were the last one, Balerian's last rider. He says yes, only for a short time before he died. I'm gonna go back.
That is, Balerion is the skull that they're standing in front of.
Correct. That's what I assumed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting here, and I didn't catch it the first time I watched it, he says, you know, died the last memory of Valeria of old, and I believe she says, but Vhagar still lives to somewhere, and he says, bit too large for the dragon pit. And he also says, some would say too large for our world. So there is, the other dragon is still out there somewhere. And I feel, as someone that has, again, for those listening, don't make fun of us. I haven't read the books. I don't know what's to come. But I feel like those are those small seeds that is going to come back to play later
he said
on.
Somewhere
that
on
dragon
the coast
is
of the
definitely coming into play at some point.
Yeah. Well, we know from the very first episode in the beginning that there were 10 dragons.
Yeah.
So they had 10 dragons. We've seen 2. We know this one's dead. And now we know another one still lives somewhere that's supposed to just dwarf these other 2.
Correct. And they do say that she asked where she nests. He said, I'm sorry. And she said, do you know where Vhagar goes home? And he says the Dragon Keepers believe she made home somewhere on the coast of the Narrow Sea.
Yeah.
And that the workers at Spicetown report hearing her song at times. They say it is a sad thing. So I think that's where it kind of leaves off. They talk about dragons probably getting lonely, and then it leads back into this whole marriage thing.
Yeah, and it's just so sad here because she's trying to play the part. She obviously is trying to be interested in things she is, and she's so young, and this is where you see, and really in my mind, of how long Otto has been training Alicent. Because Alicent knows everything to say, when to say. Now she's also older.
But she can say it without the king catching on, and the king catches on really quickly here.
Yeah. So then they kind of move into the other conversation where she stops, and she's like, she literally stops him in their walk and tells him it would be a great honor for us to join houses, and I will give you many children of Valyrian blood. And the king basically just looks at her, and he's just like, did your father tell you to say this? Like, and she just gives it away. Like, she just gives it away. Like, yeah. my father told me to say this. And then the skeeviest thing of this whole thing, he's like, what did your mother say?
Which I thought was funny.
And it's like, well, my mother said I wouldn't have to bed you until I'm 14. It's like, oh my God.
And as someone with a daughter, did that just make you cringe?
My daughter's 6.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But like, imagine 8 years from now.
I would knock that motherfucker out. like, I'm sorry. Like, king or no king, like you are not walking up to my daughter like that as a, how old is he supposed to be, in his 40s at this point? Maybe late 30s. And like, and I'm trying
40s,
here
this
to
guy
be
looks like he's 70.
Well, I mean, come on, man. They don't live that long. This guy's got like every legion that you could possibly have. You make it to like 45 here, you're ancient. And everything in my body is just like cringing at this point of this conversation that he's having with this girl. And but the other side to me is like, Lyanna, you're blowing it. You're blowing it. He's catching on to the ruse here. But it's just, and I try to put myself in a situation of like, okay, this is just how this was. They got to join the houses. They do this. This is how the times were, but it does not make it any easier to see. Like it just, especially having a daughter myself, I'm like, no, this shit's just not happening. As this is all going on, we kind of scale back. And I want to say this set was gorgeous. Like they're walking through this beautiful garden and it just looks amazing. Again, I love the amount of color that we're getting in the world and these beautiful sets to really show how grand this place was before winter's coming. Winter came for however many years, but we didn't get that in Game of Thrones because they didn't have enough money to go around and find all these amazing sets. They had to do everything where they were at, and they had to build a lot of stuff. So you didn't get a lot of scene setting shots, and here you're getting that.
Yeah.
But we kind of pull back and you see Rhaenyra is watching her dad walk through the garden with Lady Lyanna. And it's just kind of one of those things where you're just like, ugh. Yeah, you may not want to talk to her, but she ain't stupid. She knows what's going on. And then you have a very Cersei to Sansa conversation here.
Yeah.
I felt like this made me really feel like when Cersei had that conversation with Sansa, because the queen that never was is sitting there and she sees her looking at essentially the king with her daughter that she is trying to have her father wed. And she has some words for Rhaenyra. And she starts off with like, this bothers you, doesn't it? Doesn't this bother you? And she has this smirk on her face like I know it does, and I'm going to try to twist the dagger here. And Rhaenyra responds, the way she's supposed to be, like, he's the king. It's his duty to take a new wife. He's trying to strengthen the line.
But I do like that she questions the queen that never was immediately. She says, does it bother you? It's your daughter. And I do like that she's like, of course it does. Of course it bothers her.
Yeah.
And that's when she goes in and does a little bit more explaining.
Yeah. So, and then she kind of goes through all of it. And, but I understand the orders of things. I'm not sure you do. Like, that's the queen that never was' response to Rihanna. It's like, I don't think you understand this game. It bothers me, but I get the order of things and you don't. You are just a girl. You don't get this game.
But it's in a very hypocritical and angered reaction because she lived that dream that Rhaenyra is currently in, and she's so consumed with spite that, like, well, they didn't let me get it, so she's basically telling Rhaenyra, like, you might as well just give up because these men will never let you have
she says it. She says it like he's gonna marry somebody. They're gonna have a male heir, and it's not gonna be you. Like, it's not gonna be you. And because that's the order of things, and I kind of want to heart, like, she keeps going, like, that's just how the order is. And then Dany comes out, like, it is a Dany moment where Rhaenyra is like, when I'm queen, I'm gonna create a new order.
But
and she just comes out.
But she has a response again. She cuts right back at her.
Well, she cuts back at her, but I do like, she kind of says, you know, I hope you do, but the realm is controlled by men. And they already had the opportunity to appoint a queen to the Great Council, and they denied it.
And that's what
she says. Yeah, go ahead.
She cuts into her and says, "You're the queen that never was." So basically, now Rhaenyra is calling out her.
They denied you, Princess.
And then she says, "The queen that never was," and she's playing on her spite. And she immediately jumps in with her Dany high horse, and she says, "But they bent the knee to me and called me heir to the throne." To which, again, I was impressed because this woman had a cutback again. And she says, and we talked about this earlier, she says right here, let me look it up here. She says, here's
but you're still the cupbearer.
You're still the cupbearer. Are you, all these men that bent the knee to you? She said, but they bent the knee to me. She said, do you remind your father's men of that as you carry their cups? And then it kind of, they just have this stare moment and they kind of walk away. And basically the queen that never was says, this is the hard truth.
Yeah. And I almost, as we're going through that and they have this scene, and I think it's just a wonderful scene between these two actors. It was phenomenal. And that's why I feel like it was very Sansa Cersei moment of like, you just don't understand what it's going to be. And Sansa was like, no, I know how to play this game and who's going to outlast who and who's going to survive longer as a female in this world, because the men are not going to let you sit on this throne. They will do anything in their power to make sure that's not there. And they're already trying to find ways to take you out and remove you from this power. And it's, she definitely wants to align her family and have her daughter in that seat that she was, to raise her family's place. But I also feel like she didn't need to go talk to her and she didn't need to be there. And it's also like a learning moment that she wanted her to understand what her place was. And I do 100% believe she would be very happy if she became queen and changed the order of how things work. So I think she would be happy with that. But until then, I'm going to play the game because I know how this game needs to be played. So then we go back to the king's quarters, and he is talking to somebody in his quarters, and he's saying, it seems the realm wants for a new queen. And of course, who is he talking to? Poor Alicent. Poor Alicent is sitting here as the king is telling her that, everyone wants me to have a new queen. And she says, again, this girl knows what to say. Right after that, she's like, a good and kind queen will give comfort to your subjects. And what has she been to the king for the last 6 months?
Because she makes it seem like she's talking about Laena, too.
She's making it seem like she's talking about Laena. And I also kind of want to point out that did the council have a particular lady in mind? And then he tells her that Laena is part of it, Lady Lyanna. And she's like, it's a strong match. Again, she's just reiterating her father has said everything to her and using that psychology. And she's good and kind and she will enjoy your company, your grace, as have I.
And then she has one final touch to it.
Go ahead. What was that final touch?
That dragon that he had dropped earlier in the episode, she had
Yep.
the stonemasons mend it for him.
Stonemasons mend it. But there's something that happens right before that. She's sitting there picking her fingernails like she was during the tournament and making them bleed. So in my mind, she knows she's playing a game that she's very uncomfortable with.
Correct.
And doesn't want to be here. So that just small little cut to her thing where she's just grinding into her thumbs and tearing back and literally maiming herself and hurting herself in the presence of this king because of what she knows he's alluding to is just so discomforting to her.
But I also find that she's conflicted too, because I do think she enjoys her time in there.
I don't think she enjoys it at all.
I do think she enjoys the time because she doesn't have these moments with her own father.
I have to disagree with you on that. I don't think that's there.
Conflicted.
I think she's conflicted because she has what her father wants her to do, and she knows Rhaenyra will not stand for it. I think it has nothing to do with her liking the king. I think it's because her and Rhaenyra have a very interesting relationship that might even be a love relationship there. A sister love or more than that, who knows? But I think she's conflicted between doing what her father wants her to do and hurting her friend dearly in that process. It has nothing to do with this king. She is not there because she likes anything. My personal opinion. She does not like these visits.
We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, we'll see. But yes, you're right. She has the dragon that he dropped and broke, reforged, and gives it to him as a present. And he's just like, this is a very, very kind gesture. And he looks at it just so endearing. And this is why I don't think she enjoys it, because when he says that, very kind, she doesn't look him in the eye. She looks away from him and has this look of just like, my stomach is turning, but I have to sit here and play this part. She is not happy to be there. But anyway, we move forward, and then Otto comes in, and he basically says, hey, we've called the small council session. You need to come. And he's basically tells them, I'd rather you be in there for it. And then you have that moment where she kind of just looks at her father, Alicent, and just looks very disheveled and distressed about everything that's happening. So where do we go next here?
Otto jumped in and says you need to come
so
to
you need to leave
small council and hear everything directly. And we learn that there has been a robbery of sorts. A thief has.
So, So, a thief. There's a thief. Someone's stealing shit in King's Landing, man. Right from under their nose.
What did they steal, Ender?
Well, I just love how they said this. They stole a dragon egg. So someone has stolen a dragon egg, and the king is like, how is it possible that a dragon's egg was stolen out from beneath 50 dragon keepers? There's 50 dragon keepers down there. And I love the response from this old dragon keeper who looks terrified that he's going to get killed here.
Yeah.
And he basically just says, it was Prince Daemon who was the culprit, Your Grace. What? How do you know this? Well, he left a note.
Well, he left a missive, which I was like, what the heck is a missive?
He left a missive, a note. Daemon left a note. He's like, it was Daemon. It was Daemon. Daemon was the thief because he left a note.
Now, do you have the note written down?
I don't have the note written down.
I do. No. So I love the words here of this note. Let me go over this, and I want to hear your reaction to it, because He says, "What do you mean? The prince left a missive?" And he's like, "Yes, I believe it'll explain." And he goes on to read, "It is the pleasure of Daemon Targaryen." Now, this is the Maester reading this. "The Prince of Dragonstone and rightful heir to the Iron Throne." I love how he starts it out. "It is the pleasure of Daemon, the Prince of Dragonstone, and the rightful heir to the Iron Throne." Now, keep in mind, they cut to Princess Rhaenyra here, who looks just super pissed off. And it says,
yeah, she's not
they say,
happy.
"To announce that he is to take a second wife in the tradition of old Valyria. She is to assume the title of Lady Mysaria of Dragonstone." And the king is just looking like, what is happening here? "Her grace is with child and is to have a dragon's egg placed in the babe's cradle." And the king just looks super confused, as is the custom of House Targaryen. Now it cuts back to the princess again. "The prince has invited you to his wedding, your grace." The maester's like, everyone's like terrified to read, like explain to the king what's going on here. "It is in 2 days. Gods be good." And they're
so
all terrified. And your favorite guy says,
I love Corlys who is this Lady Mysaria? And they're like, "We believe it's Daemon's whore."
Which is what Otto says.
Yeah,
"This is nothing less
Otto.
than sedition. I strongly agree, sire. My brother wishes to provoke me."
So
You know,
they just kind of go on about it and like how
it.
he's provoking him, and the realm is watching. Corlys is really like, "You need to do something here. Like, you need to." And then he's like, "What? Send him to the wall, put a spike on his head." And it's like, Daemon sees Dragonstone. Like, this is a big deal. You need to do something about it. And again, he surrounded him by his gold cloaks, and he has stolen a dangerous weapon.
Now I love it.
Eggs.
Yeah, and I love it in the middle of this. Again, for the second time in the small council, someone speaks out of their place, according to the men, and that is...
Well, so it's interesting. She speaks out of place in High Valyrian, or High Valyrian, to the Dragon Keeper, who needs to speak to the dragon, so they also know it. And she asks a very specific question: which egg did Daemon take? And which egg did Daemon take?
And that's when even the king starts to look concerned, because it's like he's starting to put the pieces together.
No.
The egg was Dreamfire's princess, which
and that was Balon's egg. Balon's egg. So that's how, like...
And that was the one that the princess had chosen for Balon, too.
The princess chose... Well, the princess chose because the princess thought it was going to be a girl. So she had that. But the princess chose this egg for that baby. And it's Dreamfire's egg. And so there is some kind of interesting thing here, and I don't know if it's true, but I am going to bring it up. There were some people that I had seen, and I said we weren't going to get in a lot of fan theory, but I kind of want to bring this one out because I thought it was kind of cool, that this Dreamfire's egg, Dreamfire's egg is one that Dany hatches. So if you look at it, it's the black egg.
It does look like the black egg, so I will give them that.
So a lot of people are saying, hey, this could be the same egg, that one that Dany hatches as the black egg. I don't know. I'm not going to go down on there. But Rhaenyra is heartbroken. Like, her face. And then the king, for the first time ever,
I was pumped.
The first time the king is like, "Assemble the horses, boys. We're going to a fight." And it was probably, he's like, "I'm going to Dragonstone, and I'm going to drag my brother and drag his brother back." The only thing that Otto has ever said that was smart here was not to send the king, because we would have had a dead king. Like,
I might disagree with you here.
Well, I think Daemon was baiting his brother to come there for a reason.
I think Daemon knew that his brother wouldn't come.
Yes, and
I think and we'll get to what happens to the end, but I think with Otto taking his place and Otto keeping the king from going, I think that's exactly what Daemon expected to happen and wanted to happen.
I have to agree. I agree with that, but I want to not agree with it because it's better that way. But yeah, I think, Daemon knew that. He's a planner. He plays the game. Otto and I think you are right there. I think Daemon knew that Otto would go in his place. And that's what ends up happening here.
But I think, again, you saying we would have a dead king. I think if it doesn't play out, and we'll get to how this whole situation plays out, I think Daemon was prepared to kill Otto.
For sure. Yeah. Whoever came, I think that was the message that comes back.
Yeah.
Because he's got a dragon with him. We know he took his dragon. So basically Otto tells him, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. And then there's a moment where he's getting ready. And I want to point this out because I know a lot of people were upset with Game of Thrones on how people just teleported places. Like they're supposed to be super far away. And then all of a sudden they were just there, like in the next scene. Here they kind of have him getting ready, which looks like if you look out the window of him getting ready to go, the dead of night.
Correct.
So he's going to sail through the night to get to Dragonstone. So I do like that they're kind of setting the stage. He's got to get ready and he's got to get ready to go.
And Alicent's helping him get ready.
Yep. Alicent is the one who is there. And he says, I don't really know. I don't really remember this conversation.
He says, will you see the king tonight? And she looks I will give you credit. It looks like she has zero interest because she says, if you wish it.
Well, he also says you're like the prettiest, basically says the prettiest girl out there. Why do you still destroy yourself? So he's holding her hands and he sees her thumbs all destroyed. So like, that's why I feel like she doesn't want to be there. She's hurting herself. Mm-hmm. And then he does say, are you going to see the king tonight? Which is, again, the creepiest thing. And her response to him is, if you wish. Not yes or no, I want to. Only if you wish me to go, am I going to go. And then Ser Criston walks in. They have assembled a bunch of the guards, and they're sailing out to Dragonstone in order to have a talk with Daemon. And get an egg back and bring him back with them. Man, this was a good scene when they're at Dragonstone. Man, the setting of it being dawn and the fog and the way they bring you in to Dragonstone and you see it in all its grandness. And we've only seen Dragonstone destroyed. Because this is Dragonstone is where Dany was taking up shop when she first came over.
Correct. Yeah.
She was sitting in Dragonstone, and you see Otto and his guard walking across this very small bridge. And then they cut back. You see all the scenes, beautiful light, wonderful place. And then here comes Daemon, walking down to meet him. And you're like, oh, okay, we're going to have this showdown on a bridge here, going back and forth between each other. And Daemon's walking there holding the egg, tossing it around, all joyful, with his whore with him.
And a massive army behind him. Let's keep that in mind.
Massive army behind him.
The other side looks ridiculous compared to Daemon's side.
Not like there's no way. And Otto is like, I'm here to relinquish you from your egg, banish your whore, take your army. Like, it's like, Otto, have you ever known how to de-escalate a situation? Do you want to die, Otto?
And you can see the Kingsguard looks just like, what F is... Yeah. Sir Harold looks beside him, so they cut to Sir Harold at one point, and he's just head down like, I don't, like...
Oh my
just
God.
Kill him and let the rest of us go home.
Yeah, please just let us go. Yeah, he's just like, I can't believe...
Now, I do find it funny that Daemon kind of de-escalates it with a little bit of humor, because he looks across, he sees Sir Harold, and he sees... Criston Cole, he says, Ser Criston, wasn't it?
Crispin, was it? Ser Crispin?
And he says, Ser Criston Cole, my prince. He says, yes, apologies, I couldn't recall. And he says, perhaps my prince recalls when I knocked him off his horse.
Yeah,
to which Daemon does have a chuckle.
Yeah, and I think it's there. It's just like, I think Daemon has some respect for him. You know, there's a little respect there and banter back and forth, but yeah, the whole time we're going through this whole thing, I'm like, Otto, you're supposed to de-escalate the situation. Like he's Otto's basically gonna get the kingdom into a war. He's on the verge of getting everyone in a war and killing everybody. And he's like, you're taking the house in name. You're taking your brother's name in vain. This is terrible. And then he starts talking to the city watch and like, do you not like talk to your commander? What do you think? Are you not loyal? And it's like, my favorite part of this whole exchange is Daemon reaches his arm out and holds the egg and basically says, come get it, Otto.
But I also like that Otto
right
calls
here.
out.
Come get it.
Otto does call all these things like you're saying, and one of the things he says is it's for the heir, not for bastards fathered on a common whore. And they cut to the lady, the whore, and she looks very confused on what Otto is saying. She looks
confused as shit.
She just
confused.
She's like,
shit.
"What do you mean?
No
He's
idea
saying
what's going on.
that I'm pregnant? What is going on?" She looks very confused.
But then he's like, Otto again. Daemon puts the egg out and he's like, come get it.
Mm.
So rather than have a conversation again, what does Otto say? You'll never survive this. Like, you're not going to survive this. And then it cuts back to the Kingsguard guy and he's like, what? We're not going to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
To choose violence here is to declare war against your king. And Otto's like, wonderful. Not Otto, but Daemon's like, wonderful, war, wonderful. And then they all pull out their swords. And what did they forget that, was behind Daemon? A dragon. Like, no one's remembering that there's a dragon.
With Daemon.
And then you see the dragon crawl over top of everybody. And here he comes, and it's a badass, like it's the red dragon. He's a fucking badass, and you're like, oh.
I like Criston Cole and Sir Harold's face when this dragon roars, it puts out its shout. They're just kind of like, oh shit. And even Otto is kind of like, and Daemon is just like full on power. And it's kind of like, well, and I'll be honest, I was like, well, that was the end of Otto. Good riddance to this guy.
Yep.
But he finally does a smart thing, which I still thought was going to end in his death. He tells the Kingsguard to put their swords down. But I thought for sure this is where I thought, all right, Daemon's going to walk up, chop off his head, hand it to Ser Criston Cole and be like, take this to the king and let him come talk to me.
So then
that's how I thought it was going to play out.
I 100% agree. And then I think we have one of the coolest scenes we've had in this whole thing, and maybe it's going to be hard to beat this one, but I'm sure they'll be able to at some point.
This was their Top Gun moment.
Oh, it was. You cut to just over the top in the fog, and you see like it's just like Jaws.
Mm.
You see the fog moving, and out of the fog comes Rhaenyra on her dragon. And she got on her dragon and flew to Dragonstone. And she comes in and she flies across. And it's just like, Otto is like, what the fuck is going on? But I'm glad you're here. Like
she flies by. You can immediately see that other dragon is like
not happy.
Yeah, it is. That other dragon is going to have to listen to.
And
like this one is the boss.
Daemon's face changes when she flies in. He is no longer the confident Daemon that he was. He is now very upset to see her there. And I love the outfit she has on. It's like this black scaly outfit. Her dragon rider outfit is just amazing. And she gets off of it and she walks up there and she basically owns this situation, owns it. And she's taught. And so, and here's where I feel like he knows Otto knows he can't do anything because she walks up to him and starts talking in Valyrian, High Valyrian.
Yeah, well, Otto stops her and says, "What are you doing here?" And she basically says, "Preventing bloodshed." Basically, like,
Yeah.
you're an
Yeah.
idiot. You don't know what you're doing, and I know my uncle, so I'm gonna handle it. He tries to get Criston Cole to go with her, to which the princess says, "Try not to startle my dragon. He's very protective." Basically, telling Criston, "I like you. Don't get anywhere near me because my dragon will kill you."
Yeah, he's not gonna like you getting that close. And then they're having a conversation, and I love their conversation here. I love this conversation that they have. That they're
And that's
talking
when they
to.
switch to the dialect, like you said.
Yeah, they switch to the dialect. And basically, she walks up to Daemon, and she's like, "My father named me the Princess of Dragonstone." Like, Daemon, what are you doing here?
Get the fuck out of my house.
Like, get the fuck out of my house. This is my castle you're living in, uncle. I just love that. And he's like, "Not until you come of age." Like, they're having banter here. And it's just like them in the throne room again. And she's like, "You've angered the king." And it's
He's like, "But I'm to be." He's like, it's all defensive, like, "But I'm to be wed."
But his first thing when she's like, "You angered the king," he's like, "I don't see why. Why would he be angry? I'm supposed to be wed. He should be happy." Oh, and I love it. It's a day of celebration.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be wed.
She's like, "You already have a wife."
And he's like, "Not of my choosing." And then she gets kind of serious of like, "And that required you to steal my brother's egg." Like, now she's like very upset. Like, you had to steal my brother's egg. Like, really, you couldn't have taken a different one. And she's like, he basically says, "We all shared an egg as children in our cradle. I just want the same thing for my child." And that is immediately where Rhaenyra like calls his fucking bluff.
Yes.
And she's like, "You have a child?" And he's like, "One day, like, I might have a child."
And then his whore walks away.
Walk off. Now, my question is, did she understand them?
I think she does.
Yeah,
That's
so
gonna be my guess.
she definitely understands.
And I think it'll come into play later in their conversation why I think she understands.
Yeah, so I think that's where you get, because she definitely knew what he said. And she cut there. And then they switch back to common tongue at that point. And she basically tells Daemon, "I am right here. I am the object of your ire. Kill me.
If you want to be the next in line,
if you want to be the next in line, just kill me." And she calls him out. And this is where Daemon doesn't hate her. Daemon is her uncle, and he feels for her, even though he knows that that's the line. I think Daemon understands what his brother has to do, and that there'll be someone else's heir, and that she won't make it to the point to where Daemon doesn't kill her. Daemon gives her the egg back, and she just walks back to the group like,
but I like how he gives it to
guys.
her.
Yeah, he tosses it to her.
Like, because all these other people are like, "Oh, the egg, very gentle, be very gentle."
Yeah.
But these Targaryens are just like tossing it like a
they
football.
toss that shit around like they're just used to it. And I
he
think
chucks it at her too. He doesn't even like.
But I think, to your point, you see Daemon kind of look up at Otto, and I have to agree with you there, where Daemon was expecting to kill Otto there.
Yes.
But since she showed up and stood in front of him, he can't do that here, because I don't think he's, one, willing to put her in danger, and two, he knows that they both have dragons and it's instant death for all of them.
Yes.
Like, both sides are just going to die here. There's no way out of this. He tosses her the dragon. She has a wonderful smirk on her face, the dragon egg. She puts it back in the pot, and she just like
mounts back on her dragon.
Egg. Just rides home on her dragon. And then we cut to a scene where he's back in Mysaria with Mysaria. And I don't know the name of the room. I guess this is like the courtroom or the council room at Dragonstone. But it's the one
No,
where we see a lot of.
I'm very curious. Is this the room that they have the table that her and Tyrion are
Yes,
constantly having
her and
conversation
Tyrion are
and they're trying to
constantly in.
plan? But of course, there's no big table
Correct.
of King's Landing there because
Yeah, this is the room that you see Tyrion and Dany together in a lot, talking about stuff at Dragonstone when she's there. But this is where like Marsala is pissed. Like she is. You told them I was pregnant.
and
You
that we
told
were to
them all
be
these
married.
things. We are going to be married. She's like, I came to you to be protected. And she's not wrong. Remember what Robert did when he found out someone had a kid? Like they're going to send assassins out after her to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Like if she's known to have an heir that could possibly there, then she says like, I'm sold as property of many times I can't count. I can't recall. Like I'm here for protection, man.
Yeah, you're the king's brother.
He's
He's not going to kill you. I'm just like she knows her place.
I'm a whore. There's nothing for him to do here but to kill me. And I have to say, this Marsala character, I hope I'm saying that right, but they dropped the ball. This is the first character I think they dropped the ball heavily on. Not because of anything the actress has done. She has done a fantastic job. Her accent is so bad. And I don't understand why, because it makes no sense. Even though she's from the free cities and been traded and all of that stuff, nowhere have we heard an accent that's this thick and hard to understand. And I don't think the character needed it. Like, she already looks exotic enough. We understand that she's from the Isles. I just think I'm so trying to understand what she's saying that I'm losing her performance. And I had to watch it twice to really understand how good of a performance she's delivering.
It's called subtitles.
I know, but I just want to point out, I don't think they needed, like if she just had a British accent like everybody else, I think it still would have been fine. They didn't need to put this very thick accent. So this is the first character where I'm like, they dropped the ball here.
Yeah.
Like, on her accent, like her dialect coach. Now, they have changed dialects in Game of Thrones of people. So I'm hoping they get that feedback and maybe in later episodes she doesn't have as strong of a dialect.
Correct, yeah.
So we do see that. And then I kind of want to jump forward. There's again a scene with him and his daughter when she gets back with the egg, and basically he walks up to her like, "You're my only heir." You don't care about that. Like, she knows you don't care about that. Like, he's just an asshole. I have no desire around it of what he's saying. But then they do have a kind of a conversation around that he must, take another wife.
And he plays her mom against her.
And he plays her mom against her. I didn't like that. It shows how weak he is. But Rhaenyra is like, you know what? I understand what you have to do. It's your kingly duty. And I think they're still playing like after he saw her out there with Lyanna, in her mind, I think that's what she's thinking of. Like, this makes sense, Dad. This makes sense. So then we cut to
the small council.
The small council, and what should we call this? The Bachelor Small Council. Who's the king gonna marry? So we go through, and the greatest power in the realm. They're basically just talking, and the king lets them know he is going to marry, drumroll, please.
And everyone thinks in the entire room that he's about to announce.
He's about to announce Lyanna. This, we've all agreed. We've had these conversations.
He even looks to his daughter for approval before he announces the name. They nod to each other like she completely understands.
And who does he choose, James?
He says,
who does he choose?
That he says, I am to marry. He looks at his daughter. She smiles. They both give a head nod. And then the next words out of his mouth
Well, Corlys also like sits up in his chair.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he can't wait.
And he says, I intend to marry. And there's that pause.
There's that
it
pause.
Looks around the room again.
We had a pause with him.
Lady Alicent Hightower. And immediately the princess goes from smiling at her father to the death stares of all death stares right at Lady Alicent.
I mean...
But like, not so much anger, like a broken heart.
A broken heart. Like, how in the world
bitch.
Did this happen? And Alicent looks terrified at her, like with Rhaenyra just laying into her. And then Corlys tells him this is absurd.
Well, before Corlys speaks, I wish, and maybe we talked about in later episodes having some still frames up as we're talking about this. As it cuts to Alicent looking at Rhaenyra, my favorite part about this still that I can pull up on is she looks terrified, again with the fingers.
Yeah.
You see very clear. She stood up with the fingers, and right to her side, her father, Otto, has this happy smile on it.
Like
the contrast in the two very much shows, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you understand it's all about seduction and being sly and being sneaky, and he just, like you said, he just won the game.
Well, and then it's just,
and of course then it cuts to Corlys.
Well, and then it cuts to Corlys and he's upset and he leaves. But then you have this like Rhaenyra is so devastated that she's crying. She's trying to hold it in and she leaves. And the king just has this look on his face like, what did I do? Like, you said you were okay with this. And I in my mind, I'm like,
as the king yells out to her, he says, they're looking at me and she's about to cry. And he says, Rhaenyra. And then she walks off.
Yeah. But I think it's like, did she have to preface like, Dad, you can marry anybody except for my best friend? Like, I wish we had that conversation back that we had last night because, I didn't know you were going to do this. So that's kind of like the bombshell that was dropped. And you would think we end here, but we get one more scene.
And it's a bigger bombshell in my opinion. Well, it's a bombshell, but you could see it coming.
You could see it coming. And I want to call out the set designers and everything here because there's a like sculpture here that has all these barnacles on it that they have in the detail and the shot that they have in setting this up, because they're really setting up. And we didn't mention this before, but Corlys is known as the sea snake. Mm-hmm. So like he's known for being a sailor, and he's known for the high seas.
A skeleton of a sea snake.
You see a skeleton of a sea snake on the table, and then you see this like barnacled, like it's been on the like almost like this was pulled out of a ruin from like old Rome, and it's been sitting at the bottom of the ocean. And not Rome, but like Atlantis. Like I pulled this up.
It's got
from
a very
Atlantis
Pirates of the Caribbean, Davy Jones ship.
And then we see Corlys, and he's talking to somebody, and he's kind of talking about how he grew up, and unlike he grew up from nothing, and he broke his back to get there. He had nothing but the sea. He had to scratch it out, and you're just like, okay, who the hell is he talking to? Who the hell is he talking to? And then they cut around, and it's Daemon. Daemon's sitting there, and he basically says, we've been passed over too often. We're very much alike. So Corlys is now like, I cannot get what I need from the king, so I'm going to go to the next best thing I can find. And that is currently Daemon. And he's basically asking him for help at the Stepstones. He's asking him for help with the pirates. And we cut again, the crab feeder kind of like bookends this episode. We cut back to the crab feeder where we see all these people just being fed to crabs while they're talking, and how the king has denied him. And I love Daemon saying, he basically says, I can't
Because he
remember the
talks bad
exact
about the
words.
king a little bit. He's like, he's denied me. He was all this.
Before he gets to actually really talking bad about him, he basically, Daemon says, that was never my brother's strongest trait. And then Corlys says, what? And Daemon's response is being king. And like, that's kind of like the dagger there. And we get this like shot of the crab feeder for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it looks like the crab feeder has dragon scale.
Yeah.
Do you remember when like Lord Jorah got it? Like
Mm-hmm.
it looks like he has dragon scale. And this guy does not look good. Corlys is basically just not happy, and he really wants help opening up these shipping lanes because he's very, very worried about these shipping lanes being closed and crippling there. But then Corlys starts talking about the king, and that did not make Daemon happy.
Yeah, he basically says,
That did
you
not
will
make
not
him happy.
speak of the king in that as, you know, basically like I can speak whatever I want of the king. You will not.
Yeah, because he's my brother, but you will not speak illy.
Which again
ill
goes
of
back
my
to
brother.
the family love.
But I think that goes back to there's this inner circle in Targaryens. Like, and it kind of goes back to like brother, you know, brother's just like, I can talk bad about my brother. You can talk bad about like my sister, but if someone else talks bad about my sister, oh, we're throwing some blows. Like I don't like you anymore. So mind your tongue when you're around me if you want to talk bad about my brother, because he basically says you will not.
But
So
Corlys
it seems
doubles
like-
down on his opinions.
Yeah, he does.
He doesn't back down. He basically
that's
says
kinda-
we are the second sons and we have to, you know, earn our.
Yeah, but that's kind of where we end it. So Corlys, so the king drops the bombshell of marrying Alicent Hightower, and Corlys is going to Daemon to get the help that he needs because he knows and you know, honestly, I think he's taken Rhaenyra's advice on I need a dragon rider. Like he has a dragon, he can just take care of this real fast.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also aligning himself with, I think, who he thinks is going to be the strongest in what feels like to me an inevitable fight and a struggle for power here that we're going to see.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, James, another long episode here. We'll start working on cutting these down and getting through it, but there's just so much to talk about, and I really love talking about these episodes. Thank you for everybody that stayed with us through all of this. This has been the Last Choice Network House of the Dragon podcast. They are on season one, episode 2.
Episode 2.
And I hope you stay around for more of this because I am really loving this series. If you want more, we're also going to be tackling, which came out tonight since we're recording this a little bit later. We're going to be trying to tackle also, if we have time, the Rings of Power that just came out on 9/2. So hopefully we will have some podcasts around that. I don't know how we're going to get all of it in, but I think we'll make time because these are some great shows. I'm loving where HBO is going with this. And just so you know, we're going to be trying to get these episodes out closer to when they air than having to wait a little bit. But we didn't know we were going to do this. We just, you know, kind of on a whim was like, hey, we're both watching this show. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Thank you for staying with us. Everybody have a great night, evening, day, whenever you're listening to this. Enjoy everything. Leave some comments down below wherever you're watching this, if it's YouTube.
Give us some of your theories, unless you already have read the books and you have some spoilers. Try to stay away from those. But
Yeah, let's not drop the spoilers in there because I'm trying to and word of advice to everyone out there: don't Google any of the names in this to figure out who they are. because you immediately get a page that tells you exactly who the character is and if they die, when they die, all the information about them. It's just giant spoilers out there around the book. So don't Google the names. Just like go into like IMDb and look it up, or find something that's not a spoiler, because I almost made that
Look
mistake.
up by the episode. You can go on
Yeah.
IMDb, look at the actual episode, and look at the cast through the episode. That is your best way to kind of see. But then again,
Yeah,
don't click on each individual character and learn too much, because you will spoil the show for yourself.
You will spoil it, and I almost made that mistake, but I caught myself. I deleted real quick. I didn't read far enough, so it's been great. Thank you, everybody. We are out.
Have a good night, guys.